Buckle up, folks. This is going to probably be a long one. Welcome to Stillspeakpod. Geez, what a day. It flew by in seconds. It feels like I got next to nothing done and was so distracted by all of the events of today. This is, of course, an update on the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie case. So much to say, but let me start with last night. I was ready to record an update on the case, but my Wi-Fi was not cooperating, and so I got impatient and I went to bed. I tried recording before my kids woke up this morning, but my husband had a wash going, which is in the garage where I record, and it couldn't wait. So I had to postpone it until about 10:30 this morning. When I started to record, I first did a Murdaugh story update, and then I did a Petito and Laundrie update. I got done with both and immediately went to my phone. When I'm recording, I don't look at my phone so I don't get distracted. And immediately I saw breaking news that Brian's parents, Roberta and Christopher, had gone to the reserve this morning, and that it was confirmed by their lawyer, Stephen Bertolino, who I like to refer to as Stevie B. He said that the parents contacted the FBI yesterday evening to let them know that they were going to search the reserve this morning. So this means that after it was announced the reserve was back open to the public yesterday, they decided at that point to go in together to look for their son. Stephen said law enforcement met the parents there, and after a brief search, articles belonging to Brian had been located. Within about, 15 minutes or so, it was said by a credible reporter with a very good track record that partial remains had been found. And at that point, we saw tents getting set up and a lot of law enforcement arriving at the scene. And no law enforcement confirmed the partial remains claim by the reporter. But then it was tweeted that the FBI was going to be holding a press conference at 4:30 Eastern Time. And at that point, I think we all kind of knew and figured what they were going to be saying. During the presser, it was said that partial remains had been found along with a backpack and a notebook belonging to Brian. Interestingly, the agent actually said that Brian was a person of interest in the murder of Gabby Petito, which is the first time we have heard them reference her death a murder rather than a homicide. I don't think it was a slip-up because he was reading from a prepared statement that was written down, and he was reading from it. And since FBI Denver is the lead agency in charge of the investigation, I'm willing to bet they gave him the statement to read, and he just came to read it since he is closer to the reserve, obviously, than any agents out of the Denver office. And you can probably hear it in my voice. I probably sound a little bit different than I do in my other videos. I'm just... I'm aggravated. I'm frustrated. I'm feeling infuriated. I'm really just straight up pissed off, to be honest with you. I had to let some time pass and let my emotions kind of chill out before I can think clearly about it all. And, I've been reporting on this case since September 14th, which is when kind of it seems that everybody kind of got wind of it and started reporting on it. And I've been doing it nearly every single night. And I've talked about and covered so much, so to the point that I was actually running out of what to even say without any new developments happening. I basically had said all there was Tuesday. So last night I'm like, all right, well, people are still wanting, content on this. So what am I going to do? There's nothing to really say, instead of, me just repeating myself constantly. So I decided last night when I sat down to kind of write up some notes, I was like, I want to get into the mechanics on if Brian could be on the run. So what I threw together and what I posted earlier was talking about, burner phones and whether or not he has money and transportation and all the different forms of transportation and much, much more, like all the mechanics of if he could be on the run. And at the end of it, I really came to the conclusion that Brian had to be close to home because I couldn't see how he could have left the area undetected because almost everything in 2021 is traceable or there are cameras everywhere. So that's the conclusion I came to after I laid it all out in that video. But I still felt, though, he was alive at that point. Now, we don't know if the remains found are Brian. We also don't know how he died. If it is, it's certainly looking like this is it, and it is him. We should have the results on if it's him within a few days, just like when they found Gabby. It only took 2 days for us to know for absolute sure it was her. We may never know how he died. Was it by his own doing or the elements? And it's going to depend on how much of him, if it's him, is actually found, or if he left a note, or if a weapon is found, or if there's any type of evidence on the items that were collected near the partial remains. And there is a YouTuber who is known for running with false information, and that person is claiming that they heard while at the reserve that they did find a gun. Absolutely no news station has confirmed this, nor did the FBI. So far, it seems this is the only person claiming such. I might go a little all over the place here, so just bear with me the best you can. I wrote up some notes, and I'm just kind of going off just my reaction to a lot of this after I've had some time to sort of process through all of it. So what I want to do is I want to backtrack because I have said many things during this investigation, and I also went over every possible theory of what happened to Gabby, and then I did the same with Brian. I can recite the timeline and information in my freaking sleep at this point. Out of the many things I said, there was one video, I'm not sure which one at this point, but I talked about if he took his life in that video. And I recall saying that usually when someone does such, they want to be found, and so that their loved ones can know and have some closure. And I said it made no sense to me that he would hike a distance into the reserve and then end his life and, leave that possibility of him never being found. And I said it would make more sense that if he did take his life, that he went, parked the car, got out of the car, walked into the entrance area, and stepped off to a side trail and did it there. That way he could be found. But I really leaned more towards the fact that he didn't take his life, because I thought and I said that I felt he was too much of a coward. But I also said that, he had many opportunities to do such prior and didn't, like after Gabby at the scene in Wyoming, or on his way home to Florida, or during the 11 days prior to cops being involved, or that he could have just done it in the home, in his bedroom. And I left, though, the possibility that if he did, then maybe the reserve was chosen because he didn't want to do it in the home or the Mustang and leave, his parents to have to find him that way. I also recall saying that at some point that maybe, just maybe, he came back to Florida knowing he was eventually going to end his life or go on the run because he wanted to spend time with his family before that happened. Hence the camping trip with them and the bike rides with his mom and the mowing the lawn for his father, according to the neighbors, the Guthries. And it was the only thing that made a smidge of sense to me for why he would make such a stupid-ass decision to drive back home in Gabby's van. Now, I'm not recalling all these things I said as a way to be like, look, I was right about some things, because I don't know if I was right. Not yet, I don't. I was definitely wrong about some things because, for one, I thought he was still alive. And many people believed the reserve was a distraction and a dead end, and people were attacking law enforcement nonstop about it. And I was just not totally sold that it was a distraction or a dead end. And Josh Taylor's interview with Brian Ensign, maybe like 2 weeks ago, saying that they haven't found anything, I still didn't believe that. I thought that he was just saying that because I'm like, there's just no way, because I've seen how the FBI operates. There's just no way in my mind that they spent all this time and all this money and resources out there if they have absolutely no clue what happened. But many people thought that, nope, he's not there. And again, I just felt like there was something. They had to have known that he was there at some point. Now, what we've learned since earlier today is that Christopher and Roberta and 2 officers met up there, and they spread out on a trail that Brian frequented, and they went on either side of this trail when they split up. Chris, his father, found a bag containing some of Brian's items. There is a rumor that it was one of those dry bags, the kind that keeps things from getting wet. The FBI did not even mention this bag. But anyways, on the other side of the trail, officers found the backpack believed to be Brian's, and that is what was near the partial remains. And that's the part that FBI did share, which was they found a backpack and a notebook. Which this notebook is really fascinating, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Maybe the notebook was in the bag that Chris Laundrie found, but the FBI did not clarify that. This information about separating onto the trail to find items or find Brian and how they came across the items is coming from Stephen Bertolino, the Laundrie's attorney. Excuse me. So he then elaborated a little bit further of what we've already been told, and he said that the Laundries called him yesterday and told him they wanted to search the reserve now that it was being opened, and so he called the police and said that, the parents would be at the reserve at 7 a.m., and it ended up being that officers met them at the reserve. Now, I want to reiterate this next point. I've said it in my Summer Wells series. in this series, and I believe one other series, and I just want to hammer this home because I want people to understand this for future cases. And actually, something similar is happening in another case that I considered covering, and now I'm not really sure that I want to because I'm seeing a lot of the same behavior, and I don't even know if it's worth it because it will just be a whole lot of repeating myself over and over again, but maybe. But this is what I want to reiterate. Many, many, many times, the FBI will tell parents or family members to not search. I know that sounds crazy. I know that so many people think that they'd be like, you'd have to bring out the SWAT team to stop me from looking for my kid. You don't know that. If the police told you that you cannot search, good luck going up against them. That's all I'm going to say about that. Why do they do that? No, it doesn't mean because they think they're guilty and they don't want them involved. It's usually because they only want to use trained volunteers to do a grid search. When you do a grid search, you're making sure that you're covering every single inch and nothing gets overlooked. But further, they typically do not like any type of relative to be looking for their loved one when they are not trained and it is a dangerous terrain or environment. Carlton Reserve is dangerous, okay? There's all kinds of creatures and animals up in there. And God knows what else. And they've explained in other cases that basically you don't need now a relative to go missing or end up dead while you're in the middle of looking for somebody who's missing, because it derails the investigation or distracts from the original goal of finding the original person missing. In this particular story, right, we have Gabby who's dead and you have Brian who's missing, or quote unquote missing at that time. To have the parents then help in searching, especially when you're deep into the reserve, maybe not so much near the front or the entrance area, but deep into the reserve, you don't need one of them being eaten by an alligator or hurt or anything of that nature, because now you have a third person that's either missing, dead, or hurt. Now, I don't know if the FBI told them you cannot search. However, what we do know is that the reserve was closed to the public. And regardless of what you think of the parents, they're considered the public, even though law enforcement was looking for their son. Therefore, it was not open to them. Weeks went by before the FBI asked Christopher Laundrie to guide them to some of the trails that Brian frequented. Allegedly, according to Stephen Bertolino, when they first told police that Brian had taken off, they did tell them the specific spots that he would visit. But they wanted him to actually show them. They thought maybe it would help a little bit if he was on the ground with them. And if you notice, it wasn't Chris and Roberta, it was only Chris. Why? Think about it. Take one. So if something happens, you don't want to lose two people or what have you, right? So they did a very controlled one person coming there to assist them. And when they did such, they did not go deep into the reserve. They were actually relatively close to the front. So that makes total sense. Why am I saying all that? Because what do you know? The people that everybody think are the devil, the day that it's announced that the reserve is now open to the public, Chris and Roberta Laundrie want to go there to find their son. Everybody was so pissed off and going on about, well, if you're really worried about your son, why aren't you looking for him? Well, guess what? They wanted to go look for their son the morning after this reserve reopened, and they decided last night they wanted to do this. If they believed he was there, it would make no sense at all for them to go searching any other place for him than there all this time. Because people were like, well, if they can't search the reserve, they can look other places. Where? You need leads and evidence to go look other places. You don't just start walking aimlessly through the streets in the woods. I mean, you could, but if you believe he's there and you have evidence to show that he went there, like the Mustang, then as his parent, you're going to believe that he went there and he didn't go anywhere else. So this made total sense to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why do I feel like I'm the only one who sees this? It's kind of really, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I just think it's unfair. That's all. I do. But we're going to get into that. But first, not much else has come out. And, we should probably be receiving more information in the next few days, one way or another for sure. And I also learned today that when I think I've seen the worst of people, they always seem to remind me it can be worse. I talk so heavily on here about the public's emotional reactions to stories and the witch hunts they create because I've seen it. I've seen it happen over and over and over, time and time again. And at this point, more times than not, the public ends up being wrong. At least recently in a lot of the outcomes of cases I've been following in the last several years. I should not have been shocked in the least to see protesters at the press conference chanting justice for Gabby the second they walked away from the podium. Initially, I was like, huh? He's most likely dead, folks. Were you not listening? What the heck are you screaming about? And then I saw who was doing it, and it was the same protesters who had been outside the home screaming and hollering, making all types of assumptions and accusations along with threats for weeks now. So then it clicked. I was like, oh, they mean justice for Gabby, aka arrest the parents. A short time later, the crowd moved back to the home and were screaming some of the most disturbing things I've heard in quite a while involving a case. And I was just shaking my head because I should have never expected anything different than this type of gross behavior. And I know that's not a personal opinion, and it's definitely not a popular one, but I'm sorry, but it's gross. But let me back up earlier in the day today. So before the partial remains information started to circulate is when their lawyer said they went out there and articles of Brian's stuff had been found. Of course, the public immediately was jumping on theories that the parents planted the items to throw law enforcement off since they opened the reserve back up yesterday. And groups went wild, and everyone was all like, oh, how convenient. Oh, what a coincidence. Not, oh, give me a break. They definitely planted the items and blah, 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 blah. They ignored Stephen Bertolino's text where he said they contacted the police the night prior about wanting to go and search the reserve, and that officers met them at the reserve this morning. If you're wanting to plant any type of evidence, you're not going to contact law enforcement prior to that. And there's zero chance they went there prior to last night or overnight with all the surveillance that's been on them. For Pete's sake, they went to Walmart yesterday and it made headline news. then the partial remains rumor came out before the FBI confirmed partial remains. So there's that. But anyways, regardless of what you think of the parents, Roberta is a mother. She was his mother. And a mother's intuition is strong. Maybe she knew in her gut he was gone. And she was set out to prove that to everybody. Remember, she didn't go with Christopher when he went to the reserve to help point out where Brian would go in the reserve. Maybe his father had, some idea of where he would visit, but maybe it was actually Roberta who knew more about which trails that, Brian would visit. So she was able to really narrow down which trail this morning. But even now, people, of course, are saying that Chris Laundrie finding the bag belonging to his son is, so convenient, basically implying that he put it there. And I replied to this person on Twitter, and I said, I suppose you think he planted his partial remains there this morning too, right before the officers arrived. I mean, come on. I did predict that no matter what happened, you will definitely have many people who will hold, steadfast at the parents' involvement, even if it's proven one day that they absolutely had nothing to do with helping him besides obtaining a lawyer. So it's not even slightly surprising to see people thinking that this is all a setup or some type of plant. Others think that Brian killed someone else and that's somebody else's body that Brian killed to distract officers so he can get further away. For the love of God, I'm not even kidding. I've seen this comment several times now today. Others think the FBI set all this up to make Brian think that they think he's dead so that he'll make a move and then they can catch him. And then some people are like, maybe the parents killed him after finding out he killed Gabby. And then they planted the Mustang in his body in the reserve. Turn off your TV. If you're one of these people, do you hear yourself? Do you? This isn't a joke. And the FBI isn't going to stage something like that. Instead of following true crime, I think people with these outlandish series, you need to get to work writing some screenplays instead. Another thing that I remember saying, which I believe was the night of the 18th of September, after the very first day they searched for Brian in the Carlton Reserve, I came on and I said, breathe, relax, because when I caught up for the day after being out all day, it felt like pure chaos in all the groups. It was just so insane. I couldn't even make sense of half of what I was reading. And I said in that video that the most simple and easiest answer is usually the right one. It doesn't have to be so complex. Him being dead so close to the entrance of the environmental park and the Carlton Reserve, not far from where the Mustang had been parked, is guess what? The simplest and easiest answer. It makes total sense. If he killed himself and if it's him, he parked the Mustang, he got out, he walked in, he walked off to a side trail, and boom, was done right there. So that, someone would eventually find him and his parents would know he's deceased. Some people were out here talking about hands coming out of a garden bed. And meanwhile, Brian was likely already dead underwater in a swamp. 5 miles away from his home. Hey, I got an idea. Maybe the imaginary hand was actually a vision instead of, it actually being a hand. It was a vision of Brian as a zombie signifying his death. I mean, at this point, why not, right? All the other theories are just as crazy. Now here's the unpopular part. I'm going to take it even further. And it's not going to be surprising for anyone who's listened to my other videos, but here we go, okay? Leave the parents alone. Stop. They are parents just like millions of other people. Roberta grew Brian inside of her body and gave birth to him. Her and his father loved their son. He was only 23 years old, his entire life ahead of him, and is now more than likely dead. And not only dead, but pieces of him are still missing. No matter what you think of them, they are grieving. No one should ever be heckled when they are grieving, and 2 wrongs don't make a right. If you're mad because they didn't help find Gabby, or did not seem, in your opinion, to care about Gabby, fine. But being spiteful and hateful and downright gross towards them is just wrong. They once had a full family, and forever their lives are now changed. You want someone held responsible. Trust me, I get it. I'm pissed as hell that he's likely dead, and that the remains are him. However, they are not responsible for his actions. Period. End of story. He was a 23-year-old man. It doesn't matter if he lived at home still or not. I have a 25-year-old brother who still resides with my mother. If he did anything like this, my mother's not responsible for him, or the one that should be held accountable for his actions. Yes, it was their child, but it was their grown child who was a man. Young man, but man nonetheless. And if it's eventually determined or it comes out that they played a role, the FBI will handle it. As it stands, from what I'm seeing, it does not appear that they were involved if he's dead and it's him and he took his own life. There's just no way that I can believe that they helped him to escape so he can go end his life. That makes no sense at all. And if you're somebody who thinks that they cared about, enough about him to do this elaborate scheme to help him run, buy burner phones, hide him in a bunker under the garden bed, or was supplying him money, whatever, then you can't also believe that they didn't care about him and wouldn't try to stop him from taking his own life. I'm going to try to watch my tone here. Sorry. I'm just... This story is just further confirming so much of what I said in my Summerwell series. Almost to like a T. It's just hitting every damn point I made in there. And I'm not saying that to toot my horn and be like, oh, I was right. No, not at all, actually. I'm actually hoping my channel is going to help people to analyze these cases and look at these cases and approach these cases differently. My opinion doesn't have to be right. This isn't a game. I'm not looking to be right. What I'm looking to do is to open minds and get people to stop being so reactive. let's backtrack again, okay? Let's do this. People were appalled that Brian lawyered up. I wasn't, because I actually think that it's wise as all hell to do that. And I advise everyone to protect their rights. I do not think that lawyering up automatically means guilt. And I think that blanket type of thought or saying that people do is just really misguided. But then it came out that they had a lawyer prior to the cops showing up. At that point, I was like, whoa, that's crazy and sketchy as all get out. Like, what? You had a lawyer before the cops even showed up? What the hell? So even I felt that, okay? But then I heard Joe Catito say that he told the parents in text that he was contacting the police, which then made it all make sense on why they got a lawyer, because they saw that text and that they were worried that their son was going to be implicated in her disappearance. People were mad or were suspicious of the fact that they didn't respond to any of Gabby's family's texts or calls. And I need to say that we still don't know what Brian had told them or was telling them while they were receiving those calls and texts, which could have prompted why they didn't call back, answer, or text. And no, it doesn't necessarily mean they knew what he did and they were trying to avoid the parents. It could have been any number of things. I've talked about it in many other videos. If they went into damage control because whatever Brian told them, let's say he told them, we broke up, she went back to Long Island, now she's missing. The damage control would be like, oh man, they're going to investigate him, and automatic instinct to protect your child sets in no matter what their age is. Maybe one day they're going to explain this, but for now, we don't know what Brian was saying to them in this 11-day period of time. And I'm sure they've overanalyzed every single thing that was ever said in those 11 days. And then we found out on the 17th that Brian had taken off. Initially, it was said that it was the 14th for weeks, and then it got changed to the 13th, which I know, seemed like a red flag to most because it's a slight story change. But when you're going through something as insane as this, under all this pressure and media attention, and it's so easy, I'm sure, to mix up the days when so many events are happening at once. People thought they gave him a head start, which is a possibility. Okay, sure. Or it could be that they did have a feeling he ended his life and that they did go there to look for him. They didn't see him at all. And, at that point, they took the Mustang so it wouldn't be towed. And everybody thought it made no sense for them to take the Mustang home if he was there. I mean, they were saying, like, why would you take his transportation if, he's there and alive? How is he going to get home? But if it did get a notice that it was going to be towed, well, if it ended up towed, he wouldn't have a vehicle anyways. So either way, he was going to end up not having a vehicle. So it's really not alarming that they would take it home so it didn't get towed. But anyways, so let's say they searched. They didn't find him or a body. So maybe they assumed they were overreacting. And maybe he really did go camping in the reserve. So they go back home. And they wait a few days to see if he would come home. But then they got concerned. And they were like, it's been days. He's not coming back. And that's when they called the police. I hate to break it to you, but all of what I just said is plausible. It is. I think the people involved in this case have gone a little too far. farther than I've seen in other cases, but not that much farther than I've seen people go in other cases. And I think the idea of these parents possibly being involved and having the convenience of the last name Laundrie, where everybody can call them dirty laundries, was more enticing. It was more attention grabbing. And they really, really, really want that to be the case. It was fascinating. It's just not TV. It's not. It's not TV. It's not a movie. It's not a Netflix original series. It's not. It's real life. It's real people. Burner phones in movies seem so cool. Like the bad guy hands the other guy like a burner phone. He's like, call me when you get to XYZ. Use code word, blah, blah, blah. Not so easy in real life, folks. And I'll get hated for saying it, and I'm fine with that. If I wasn't, I wouldn't be saying it. But I said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again. I don't care how you want to spin this. I really don't. At the end of the day, the story itself is tragic. Yes, even Brian being dead is tragic. 2 young people. Not married yet, no kids yet, no major responsibilities yet, no massive life experiences yet. Get into a van in the beginning of July. They stopped at some of the most beautiful places this country has to offer. They, skateboarded down the sand dunes. They climbed canyons. They, kissed under a waterfall. They waded through creeks and lakes and what have you. Right? And in under 2 months, one of them is murdered. 3 to 5 minutes, someone, aka Brian, let's be real, squeezed the life out of her, basically. Okay? I know that's harsh, but that's the reality. And left her body in the wilderness, like her parents called it, in Grand Teton National Park for weeks. Weeks. And then, probably roughly about, let's say he did kill himself after he left the home rather quickly. Maybe a month, tops. Maybe less, actually, because if she died somewhere between August 27th and August 30th, and let's say he died September 13th, you're looking at 3, 4, 17 days possibly later. He's also dead. A 23-year-old guy. Gone. Forever. It didn't have to be that way. It didn't. It didn't have to be that either one of them is dead right now. And what for? What could have been so horrific in the relationship? What could have caused this domino effect of death? That was what made it even worth it. Nothing made it worth it. And we may never know what, initiated their, possible argument which led to her death. We may never know that. But I'll tell you one thing. It wasn't worth one being killed and then later another one also killing himself, if that's what happened. It's freaking tragic. It's terrible. You have 4 parents on the Petito Schmidt side and 2 parents on the, Laundrie side who both, in different ways, lost their child that they fed with a spoon, who they used to swaddle and put in their crib at one point in their life, who they witnessed their first smile, the first time they took a step, the first time they said their first word, the first time they were able to give them a kiss, who they watched grow up and to graduate high school, and etc., etc. That child, for both families, is gone. And there are siblings, no matter their age, who have lost their sibling, their loved one. No matter how close they were, as a family, there was most likely love. Two wrongs don't make it right. Spiteful and hateful is not going to do anything. You could be upset that they didn't handle it the way you think you would have handled it, okay? But to be spiteful, it's just not helpful in any way. And I really hope that people find it in themselves to feel a smidge of sympathy that there's now another family who is grieving and lost a loved one. Again, if you can't muster up that, I'm at a loss for words, honestly. And all I have to say to that is, sorry for that long pause, is that, well, and I don't wish this on my worst enemy, but I'm going to say this. You better hope that you are never in a situation like this. And you can sit here and be like, I would never, because I would raise my child right. No. You have no idea if you'll ever be in a situation like this. But you better hope. Because you're going to look back at this and go, oh my God. But the sucky thing is I'm not so sure that anybody's going to learn from this case. And I don't see them giving up on anything that they've stuck to this entire time, even if it gets proven that they had nothing to do with Brian leaving and that they didn't help him in any way other than to hire him a lawyer. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Now back to the partial human remains. People find it suspicious that they now found these remains. Well, for one, that area of the park, and this is confirmed and factual, was underwater up until recently, okay? So if he did kill himself or he died way back, now, 5-6 weeks ago, I don't even know, 5 weeks ago, then yeah, he's been underwater for quite some time and therefore would not have been found. People are arguing that dogs have unbelievable scent and they use those dogs, blah, 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 blah. Okay, great, wonderful. Do you have any idea how many times in a case a body is later located after it's been searched with a canine or a cadaver dog? Dog? What the heck did I just say? Dog. Excuse me. A lot. It happens a lot. While those dogs are amazing, they really are, they sometimes do miss it. And as a matter of fact, Kaylee, Anthony, she was down the road. I visited it. From Casey's home, okay? And that area was searched multiple times and was not found. Let's talk about the backpack. People think well, if he was going to go to the reserve to kill himself, why would he take a backpack? They think that the backpack shows he was going to run and decided not to, and then this comes into play and why they think the parents did help him. They were thinking they were helping him run when really he went and killed himself. They think that this bag was used for items to go on the run with. Now, all we know was that a backpack with items and a notebook had been located. We know that Chris Laundrie found some sort of bag that was in addition to the backpack. and possibly the notebook was in this other bag. We don't know. They didn't elaborate. To that, I say if Brian killed himself, which the only way I can really think of him killing himself in the reserve would be like to hang himself, which most likely did not happen, or, shooting himself. And, well, if you're going to the reserve, you're not going to walk around with a gun in your hand, right? You're going to want to put it in what? A backpack to hide it. So I don't think the backpack actually indicates he was on the run. It could have been used just to transport the gun with him to the reserve, at least in my opinion. Now, let's discuss this notebook, because this is the only part that got me somewhat feeling positive. Okay? Why? Because what the hell is in the notebook? Okay, so let's think of it two ways here, right? If he was originally going to go on the run, then we would find out later what other items are in the bag, was items that he was going to use to go on the run. But if he's going on the run, why is he bringing a notebook? What the hell does he need a notebook for? So he can write? Okay, maybe to keep, time passing. Okay, maybe he brought a notebook to write. If he left that home with the intention of taking his life, then bringing the notebook is very interesting, because what the hell did he want to write before doing that? Was it just to express how he was feeling? Was it some sort of note to his family, and possibly not even a confession? Or was it confession? Possible. So it could be multiple different things, right? Because what else would he really need a notebook for to be with him, unless he just wanted to somehow get out some form of information? Maybe he left behind, a list of things he wanted his family to do for him, like, loose ends, or possibly his burial. Who knows, right? Like, who absolutely knows? But the notebook's really, really fascinating, and I cannot wait to hear what was in that notebook. Now, there's a lot of questions involving the notebook, because if it was underwater and these items were found in a location that had been underwater at some point, then, is it destroyed? Can you read it? Well, they seem to be sure it was Brian's, notebook. So something on it or in it had to be legible enough for them to know it was his, or for it to be recognized by his parents, or legible. If he used pencil, you have more of a chance of being able to, figure it out if it got wet and then eventually dried. If it's a pen, you're going to run into a little bit of issue, but it also depends on the paper, because sometimes you get something wet that's on like cheap paper and it all kind of just, runs together and you have no idea what the hell it says. Other times you can read it, but the paper is all wrinkled up. Like I said, there was a bag found in addition to a backpack. We don't know what type of bag. It was rumored that it was some sort of dry bag where items can't get wet. Now let's go with this theory. Let's go with that he took the notebook for him to write out a letter to his family, or some sort of confession, that he would want to take a dry bag and put that note or notebook inside that bag, so that he knows that after he takes his life, that this notebook would not end up ruined, and then for sure his family or whoever gets whatever he wrote. That's totally possible, for sure. They seem pretty certain that it's going to turn out to be Brian, these partial remains, and they did not say that they believe the items are Brian. They said they are Brian's. So something in these items had to be linked back to Brian. So whether, the backpack's going to have some sort of damage to it because it would have been under the water as well. So like bugs or discoloration, because not only the water, but the sun as well. So you're going to have like discoloration, a lot of wear and tear to it, but it had to be somewhat recognizable for them to know it was his, or there was an item inside of the bags. Again, possibly a gun. Maybe he took his parents' gun, and maybe that gun was in the bag. Well, no, that wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be in the bag. But maybe there's a gun involved, and a gun was nearby the body, and they connected that gun to the bag. And, so there's so many possibilities here. And I said that too fast because I'm like, wait a minute, how would the gun get back in the bag? That's not possible if he's dead. No. So erase that. Excuse me. Definitely not in the bag, but maybe they did find a gun because that was a rumor nearby the bag, and maybe it was his parents' gun, and therefore they made a connection of this gun is connected to this bag and this book bag and whatnot. I just had to pause for a few minutes because I had to use the bathroom. And when I came back, I was like, you know what? I'm going to hop on real quickly and see if there's anything I should update, before I end it. And then I get an update and I'm like, oh crap, I already ended it. And I get on and I just seen somebody else say on an article that of Roberta and Chris out searching for Brian. Roberta had on a small backpack on her back. And somebody said, oh, I hope they searched her backpack before they started searching. I don't understand this thinking, guys. I just don't, okay? So let's take that person's thought process. So they're trying to imply that they planted these items near, Brian's body today or last night in the middle of the night, which, okay. I'm sure if Brian, Chris Laundrie left at 2 a.m., I'm sure the reporters who are camping out there would not follow them. Of course they would. But take that thought process. So what you're saying is that they knew their son has been dead all this time. And instead of telling people he's dead, or the police, they've endured this insanity outside their home, okay? And then they went out there today and was like, you know what? It's time. It's time we let everybody know he's dead. They knew the exact spot he took his life. He told them exactly where he was going to be. And they were like, let's take his items that the FBI overlooked inside our home during the search warrant last month. And let's go up to the reserve. And before the officers get them, I'm going to plant those items by his body. So then we can find him and be like, oh, see, look, he's dead. Is that what people are really implying happened here? Please remember, the FBI was in the Laundrie home for 8 hours on the 20th of September. If that backpack, if that bag, or any of the items that were found today were in the home prior to today, they would have known about it. They would have seen it, and they would have taken it. I mean, really. I told my husband before I came out here, I was like, I think I've calmed down enough that I can record and not come across super sarcastic. But I failed. It's just really hard not to be. It really, really is. I tried. I really did, guys. I tried to not be. But it's just too hard. It just is. Here we have another one saying, this is all so fishy. I really don't understand what's so fishy about it. I actually think that this all makes total sense. Is it crazy that the reserve opened back up yesterday? The parents decide, okay, well, we're the public and it's open to the public, so now we're going to go search for our son. Let's go out there. And they go out there and they look around, they hook up with the officers, and they end up finding the items. Yeah, sure, if you wanted to look sketchy or fishy or suspicious, yeah, you could totally make that look that way. But is it really? Or do they just know their son better than the FBI, and they were more aware of where he would go, what his items looked like, and maybe they had an intuition that he has been gone all this time? I mean, it really doesn't have to be so complex. And another saying, like, why did Roberta have to be wearing a backpack when she was searching for him? I don't know. She could have had bottles of water in there, sunscreen, an extra pair of sunglasses, maybe an extra pair of, some type of shoe in case she got wet from the swamp. I mean, what? Oy, I can't. I also noticed that Roberta was wearing a mask in the reserve, which is outside, and they weren't really, on top of people. Which goes back to this whole rumor that supposedly she has cancer, which I've never seen actually confirmed. I don't even know where it originated. But when I saw that, I thought, I wonder if she's wearing a mask because, obviously having cancer, or if she had cancer at some point, that would be an underlying condition, so she wanted to be cautious. Anyway, regardless, it was a small little backpack she wore on her back. I don't wear purses. I have a backpack. It's a little backpack. It's not little, but it's, enough for my wallet, my makeup, my keys, my phone. Nothing major. And I started using backpacks because the kids always had their crap I had to put in my bag, and purses never cut it. So I switched to a backpack, okay? It's not weird. It's not abnormal. And they were out in a reserve. Now, if they didn't know what they were going to find out there so quickly, she might have prepped that bag for a whole day of searching, for all we know, and had all kinds of items in there for what she might need. Bug spray. Do you know what the bugs are like in Florida? Oy. They're like miniature dinosaurs that fly around. No, I'm kidding, but they're horrible. I really think that Brian came back to Florida because he wanted that time with his family, and I think he knew what he was eventually going to do. And we can only, speculate on why he was going to do that, or his motive, or whatnot. But it's the only thing that really makes any sense to me as to why, if he wanted to get away with this crime, he would come back to Florida with her van. And, and if that's the case, well, they got more than Gabby got, right? She didn't get time with her family before she died. Another person just said, they knew where he was all along. I'm still suspicious about them. Yeah, they did. They did know where he was all along, and they told police that on the 17th of September. They said he went to the Carlton Reserve. And it seems that's where he went. So they weren't lying. And it also seems that he's no longer in this earth. And hasn't been for potentially 5 weeks. Now so many are like, justice for Gabby, justice for Gabby, justice for Gabby. Well, if Brian's dead and his parents had no involvement, people feel like there's no justice now. And trust me, I was one of the people who really wanted him to be found alive. I had hopes that once cornered, he'd cave and give up the information, even though we would never know for 100% sure if he was telling the truth. I was wanting her parents to have that moment in a courtroom where they can look him in the eyes or in his direction and really describe to him how he destroyed their lives, and for him to sit in a prison cell, and suffer, especially a guy who loved the outdoors. Jail was 100% not like that. And so, yeah, I get you. I totally get you. On the other hand, though, this could be a good thing, because now the parents don't have to endure the unbearable court process, all the hearings, all the trial, having to deal with more media, and have to wonder, is he going to get off? Is his defense attorney going to be good? Is he going to get out on parole due to a technicality? I mean, all these things are factors. The court process is set up a certain way. And unfortunately, sometimes, justice that everybody wants doesn't happen. So, I mean, again, let's look at the Casey Anthony case. So, that's a lot on that family. And when you're going through that type of grief, to have to go through that process is so expensive, number one, but just grueling. And her parents don't live in Florida, and if the trial would have happened in Florida, they would have had to either relocate to be at the trial, or at least stay in Florida for a period of time, or fly back and forth. Or if it was in Wyoming, then all the parents would have had to go out there, and their lives would be uprooted and disrupted. And what if he ended up being found not guilty, or that it was some sort of self-defense? I mean, all it takes is some reasonable doubt. And, it doesn't really matter what I want. It doesn't really matter what you want. It matters what her family wants, right? And they initially might have wanted vengeance and justice, but justice can look different for everybody. And maybe now with this new information, they might think about it and be like, you know what? This saves us a lot of heartache, right? Because in a trial, they would have tried to destroy Gabby, to paint her in a way that might not have been true or accurate, but as a way to get off their client. So we shall see their reaction to this news. I'm sure they're taking it rather rough, even though they probably expected an outcome like this. You can do what you want, and I'm going to do what I want. And my prayers are going to be going out to the Petito and Schmidt family at this time, and Brian Laundrie's parents and sister and nephews and brother-in-law. I'm sorry, but it is. And on a final note, because I just saw this, Fox News has released footage where it appears an officer right near the spot where Brian was possibly found. He approaches the parents, and you see them looking at something he has, and he is talking to them. It's very hard to hear what's being said. And at one point, the mom kind of leans into the dad to block the person who's recording them. And it appears to me that they're reading something or looking at something. And at one point, Roberta actually looks a little startled. And then at that point, Christopher Laundrie puts his hand on his hip. They look a little perplexed. And then Roberta then appears to possibly wipe away a tear from her husband's face. And it sort of sounded like he's telling them to, he says, go home and sit tight, we found something. Maybe they weren't reading or looking at an item, but possibly he took a picture of an item that they found and were showing it to them on his phone to see if they recognized it. It's actually a really sad moment, and I'm sorry, I can't help it. I'm a human, and it's really sad to see this. And you obviously can tell the officer is trying to basically hint to them that, they should go home, because he puts his hand on the father's shoulder to kind of sort of console him. So that could have been after they found the remains, and they just wanted them to leave the area so that they could look further for more of the body that was located. So go ahead, dislike me, think I'm crazy, think I'm giving them too much sympathy. I don't really care. I really don't. I will forever treat these stories as they are. And that is that they are real stories with real people who had real lives. And they loved their son. Period. I'm sorry. But they did. So, on that note, until next time, I'll see you soon.